Orlando shooter Omar Mateen was known to the FBI. He had made its terrorist watch list. And so Mateen was closely scrutinized on 2 occasions for inflammatory pro-terrorist remarks and for potential ties to another American who traveled to Syria and became a suicide bomber. He was interviewed in person 3 times, then cleared. This isn't the first time the FBI has closed cases on terrorism suspects who went on to kill in the name of ISIS. Before asking how that's possible, a first consideration is just how big this threat really is. Scott Thuman reports on the new homegrown front in the war on terror.
There's not a typical profile of an ISIS recruit. They're old, they're young, rich, poor, college graduates, high school dropouts. You're going to have to triage.
Seamus Hughes spent years advising Congress on counterterrorism. Now he and his staff at George Washington University monitor the hundreds of angry pro-ISIS Americans on social media.
So what you're looking at is our old school board of ISIS Twitter followers online, so mostly Americans that we've been following for the last year or so. They're all talking about how great ISIS is.
Hughes says he doesn't want to be an alarmist, but doesn't want to minimize the threat either.
We are coming for you. Mark my words. Listen to my words, you big kuffar.
The fact is, the number of pro-ISIS sympathizers in America is surging, and the FBI is working overtime to distinguish the mere tweeters from the actual plotters, sorting through more than 1,500 tips a day.
They're making judgment calls every day, and we're asking them to make judgment calls in terms of when someone makes that leap from espousing the ideology to making a violent action. That's very difficult to do. We're asking them to be clairvoyant, essentially.
The FBI says there are 1,000 active investigations into homegrown violent extremists nationwide, at least one in every state. 88 Americans have been charged by the FBI and 40 have pled or been found guilty since 2014. FBI Director James Comey testified to the challenge this week.
We are looking for needles in a nationwide haystack, but we're also called upon to figure out which pieces of hay might someday become needles.
We have all the tools that we need. I think that they're being applied inefficiently at this point.
David Gomez is a retired FBI special agent who ran Seattle's Joint Terrorism Task Force. He says the FBI must follow the Constitution and be equally mindful of civil liberties, a legacy of the Church Committee investigations.
And we have seen today the dark side of those activities.
It was those investigations which found the FBI had engaged in unauthorized surveillance in the 1960s and 70s. But in a recent article for Foreign Policy, Gomez wrote, "The fact is, the FBI's ability to investigate any case is limited by the requirements of probable cause to open a full investigation."
It's a fluid concept. Basically, it means that you have conducted enough investigation or have received enough information to believe that a crime has been or will be committed, and you need investigative powers to go forward with your investigation.
Investigative powers like physical and electronic surveillance, tools the FBI can't use without establishing probable cause. Omar Mateen was the subject of only a preliminary inquiry. Launching a full investigation would have required evidence Mateen was about to commit a crime.
But I think it is time to take a look at these standards and see if there is in some way some wiggle room that would allow the agents to either temporarily expand their case to utilize a wiretap or to utilize an undercover investigation or some other intrusive technique, perhaps as little as surveillance.
Gomez says there is a precedent for this when the U.S. is at war.
Following 9/11, it was a lot easier to get a search warrant because of what was perceived as the imminent threat from al-Qaeda.
After Nidal Hasan killed 13 people at Fort Hood in 2009, a bipartisan Senate commission slammed the FBI. In a statement, Chairman Joe Lieberman said the FBI, quote, conducted a superficial inquiry and ended it prematurely. The commission called for a new approach to prevent domestic Islamic extremism. After the 2013 Boston bombing, the FBI disclosed it had known about Tamerlan Tsarnaev as well, but closed its case after an assessment concluded there was no evidence of a national security threat. The FBI has been working to better identify homegrown threats. The Terrorist Screening Center was created after 9/11 to keep closer tabs on potential attackers.
Congress passed a law that said pull all this information together into a single list, the terrorist screening database or the watch list, and use that across all the different federal agencies so that everyone is on the same playing field when they're trying to make decisions.
Diana Maurer is the director of the Government Accountability Office's Homeland Security Program and has studied how the FBI nominates suspects to the list.
My understanding of the FBI is a preliminary investigation is enough to put you on the list. You would have to advance to a full-blown investigation to stay on the list.
Mateen was taken off the list after his preliminary inquiry was closed. Because he was no longer an open case, the FBI wasn't alerted to his gun purchases. Even if he had been on the list, which currently includes roughly 800,000 names, he may still have been allowed to obtain a firearm.
You are still allowed to buy guns in the United States if you are on the terrorist watch list. We found that on average, roughly 200 or so times a year, there are attempts made by individuals on the terrorist watch list to purchase weapons within the United States.
The FBI and law enforcement becomes damned if you do and damned if you don't. You're expected to prevent the commission of a terrorist act, but you're not necessarily allowed to use all of the techniques that are available to you. And this is the dilemma. It's, we have a bit of a paradox here.
An added challenge, administrative duties. Sources say due to a shrinking support staff over the years, FBI special agents spend an inordinate amount of time typing up reports, their findings, and indexing information into databases instead of out on the streets investigating. However, several members of Congress right now are pushing for more FBI funding to hire additional agents.
All the money and effort we put into all this, still so many problems.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Scott. Still ahead on Full Measure, Reporters Without Borders at a gathering in Moscow. We'll hear some problems the press faces outside the U.S. with powers trying to control the news narrative.